Hello and welcome to the Rational Black Thought Podcast. I am your host, Neil Grillo, and this is episode number 250, which is kind of a milestone for me now. We've been on the air for almost 5 years. It's October the 4th, 2025, and I'm taking the title of the episode this week and also the quote from lyrics from a song. Now, the artist that I know the song from is People, but in doing some searches on the internet, I saw that there were some other more well-known groups that had performed the song as well, so it may have an original artist that produced it. But anyway, the title from that lyric is "What a Fool Believes He Sees, and No Wise Man Has the Power to Reason Away." And our theme for today is you cannot argue someone out of a position that they were not argued into. And another way to say that is you cannot use rational arguments against a person in order to get them to change their mind if the position that they hold was not come to through rational arguments. If they didn't use facts and if they didn't use reality as a basis for forming that belief, then trying to show them a different way is never ever going to work. So let's go ahead then and get to what we have on our agenda for today. And as I said a few weeks ago, we are alternating between Bible study with an atheist and strategies for Black Power, and this is the Bible study week. So we are first going through the intro, which we're doing now. No feedback this week, so we'll skip that. Quote of the week, as I said, is a lyric from a song by People. And then we are going to get to unmasking the news. And what I've decided to do is make a small change in the news segment as well. I usually had two political stories and then a religious story and then a good news story for the end. I've decided that we don't really need two political stories. The one story is sufficient to talk about where we are with what's going on in the news, and for the most part, it is always going to be what I'm calling a democracy update, though it could really be changed now to a democracy postmortem because and as this first story is going to show, I don't believe that we are currently in a democracy in the United States. Things are not what they used to be, and we are now dealing with a situation where we have to manage in an environment where there is, in fact, no democracy. Now, I should put a qualifier on that because there is a little nuance to it. And that is, I don't think that we are firmly in the grips either of a authoritarian regime, but democracy is no longer solid. The fact of the matter is, though, is that we never ever had a true representative democracy in the United States. So the fact that we have lost a democracy doesn't impact us as Black people or people of color as much because we did not have a representative democracy to begin with. But what we did have was the structural bones of a democracy, which allowed us to work within the confines of that system in order to try to bring forth a multiracial democracy. So what is gone now is that structural matrix, so to speak, within which we can work toward a better democracy for us. And so we are in a situation now where we are going to have to deal with the waning conditions of a democracy, a pre-authoritarian state, which is where we're at right now. Not really an authoritarian state, not a democracy that we have to deal with. But that's story one, and I'm getting kind of carried away here, so let's get through this agenda quickly. The next one is going to be the religious story, when the collar hides behind the crime, and unfortunately this week we're back to sexual abuse of children. Again, as I said, it is such a prolific thing that I could report on it. Not only could I report on it every week, but I could report on it multiple times every week because there were multiple pastors again this week that were arrested for that. And our pastors or priests or some other type of religious leader. But in this case, I have a particular take on it that I want to provide. Next up in Unmasking the News is the good news segment, which is Black Excellence, No Apology. So, as I said, we have 3 stories this week instead of 4, just 1 political story, 1 religious story, and 1 good news story. And also, as I said, this is our week for Bible study. So we have Bible study with an atheist. And this week, our topic is going to be what goes to heaven. Now, if you're a longtime listener, you know in the recent past, I don't remember how many episodes ago, we did have a Who Goes to Heaven Bible study where we went through various religions and denominations to determine exactly who's going to get into heaven. And the conclusion from that was, well, pretty much the bottom line conclusion is going to be the same as we have today. It's all nonsensical bullshit. But the conclusion then was that there was no clear answer in the Bible as to who is going to go because the Bible isn't clear, and other religions have their point of view as well, like the Quran with Islam, and even the Mormons with the Book of Mormon. So, but in this case, we're not going to be talking about who goes to heaven, but what. And so what we're going to talk about is it a spirit? Is it a body? And then what does the differences, the different answers to that question, what do they actually mean? Bottom line, we're still going to get to the bottom line that this whole idea of heaven and hell is nothing but fucking bullshit, but we're just taking a different look at it. Then after Bible study, we'll have reflections and call to action where we go through what the lessons were for today and then the action steps that we can take in order to embody the mindset that we are trying to move away from this fools believing what they see and move into a more reality-based existence. So that's what we have on our agenda. So we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get to the quote of the week, which again, this week is lyrics from M People. All right, welcome back and welcome to the quote of the week. So, like I said, the quote this week is actually just lyrics from a song. And the lyrics are, "What a fool believes he sees." And we're going to break this down and provide you more information about exactly what we're talking about as we get to it. But again, I didn't finish the lyrics, so I'm interrupting myself. So here's the quote, which is the same as the title. "What a fool believes he sees. No wise man has the power to reason away." And so what this is actually saying is that what a fool believes, that's what he sees, whether it's true or not, whether it's reality or not, and that nobody, no matter how wise, can reason away what they say they see. And so what this is saying, it's saying the quiet part out loud about human cognition. Belief bends perception in a way that distorts reality. Now, a lot of people like to say, especially all of this new age bullshit about the law of attraction and all of that nonsense. What they like to say is you don't need to understand how, or you just need to understand why. Why you want something is more important than how you're going to get it. And to me, that's complete nonsense because if you're 4'2" and you want to be an NBA player, you can have the strongest desire you want. That shit's never, ever going to fucking happen. And so you need to be able to find a way to get to where you're going to go, or at least to be able to recognize reality in a way to say that certain things are not possible. Because that's another thing that I want to be clear about in going into this episode, even though it's not really a critical part of it, is that this whole idea about potential is a lie. Everybody has potential, yes, but they do not. None of us have unlimited potential, and all of us have potential in different ways. My potential is different from yours, and yours is different from your brother or sister or whatever, because we all are unique and we have our own capabilities. And so, what I can achieve is not necessarily what you can achieve. And the mix of that is it can be considered good or bad, but the bottom line is for you to figure out what is your ultimate potential, living within your life the way that you want to live it, and what that can be like, and then go for that. So again, if you are a little person, I don't think basketball is going to be your key to happiness. But again, getting back to this quote, once a story fuses with identity, the brain doesn't see reality; it auto completes it, like with Word when you type in a sentence, and it'll say what else it thinks that you want to type, and that's how the brain works. So first of all, we are not cognitively able to identify and comprehend all of reality. There are colors on the color spectrum that are outside of our perceptual range. There are sounds that are outside of our perceptual range, and there are things like radiation waves, etc., which we cannot see or feel, or we can feel the effects maybe later, but we cannot feel it at the moment. So so first of all, there's that. There is the reality that is outside our ability from our senses to perceive. Secondly, there is too much reality for us to comprehend. So there are millions of bits of information that are coming at one time. And so in order to stay sane, we have to filter out that information to what we consider to be the most important. And then after it is filtered, then it is characterized by our emotions, by our body position, our body language, and by our past experiences, by our beliefs, etc. And I would say it is distorted by those things in order to become what we believe is reality. So that's predictive processing. Your brain is a prediction machine, and my brain is a prediction machine. And so things like confirmation bias, you only seek congruent data, and identity protective cognition, you defend the tribe, not the truth, is what happens. So that's why this song title says, "No wise man has the power to reason away." A fool's vision, in a fool's vision, facts ricochet off a worldview that's doing emotional labor, certainty, status, belonging, etc. So in practice, here's the way that things work. Belief goes to perception. Top-down expectations literally change what we notice and remember. So when we see something happening in reality, I mean, take for example, Donald Trump and whatever the fuck he's doing, which we'll talk a little bit about that in the news segment today. Depending on who you are, the way that you see that is different. As a progressive person and as a person who looks for social justice, when I see things that are dismantling democracy, when I see things that are moving toward retribution and using the Justice Department as a cudgel against enemies, I see all of that as bad. But if you fucking MAGA, you look at that shit and say, you cheer him on. Yes, he's doing what he wants to do. This is the way we want to go. And both of those things cannot be true, but they are true in our individual perceptions of reality. Now, my point of view is your reality, if you're that MAGA person, is defected and flawed, and so it needs to change. But nevertheless, you are going to see it completely the opposite. So the next thing that happens after belief and then perception is perception and memory. So we encode the version that fits. and then we recall it with more confidence. So whatever, when again you see Trump make a speech, I take something away from it, you take something different. If you're MAGA, you go back and remember something in the past that confirms your idea that that is a good thing, and then you double down on it. Now, I have a tendency to do that as well, but I actively fight against that because I know that we all have a tendency for cognitive bias, and especially confirmation bias. So I research things even if they conform to my already standard point of view. But then the last thing that comes in is reason, and reason only comes in as a post hoc rationalization to repaint the scene to justify what we already prefer. And that is the way people typically see reality or distort reality. And so this isn't just interpersonal, it's political and theological as well. It is conspiracy culture, prosperity gospels, and authoritarian propaganda that exploit the lyric's insight. They give a story that flattens their fears and hopes, flatters their fears and hopes, and they'll see exactly what that perpetrator wants them to see. And they see it everywhere, and they defend against it as well. And they defend against you correcting their belief. And so I'm using that lyric because it maps cleanly into our crisis today. When a nation decides a lie feels better than the truth, then the lie becomes a lens through which they see reality. From pulpits to podiums, we are told to trust vibes over verification, trust the tribe over truth, and you can't argue a man out of what he wasn't argued into. And that's the job before us, not just presenting the facts, but breaking spell work, building communities and incentives where the truth is rewarded and fraud is costly. But that's going to be a difficult thing to do. So until then, what a fool believes, he sees, and he votes it, funds it, and he preaches it to his and to our own detriment. So that's why all of this shit, that's why these religions are able to do what they do over and over every single day, because of this. And that is why Trump still has 35% of his base that staunchly supports him 100%. That's why democracy is eroding. That is why we are, as people of color, have taxation without representation. That's the problem. And again, like I have said before, the key problem that we have in this country is systemic and systematic racism, but that is based upon this fool believing what he sees. It's vice versa. He sees what he believes. So the fool makes his reality or her reality fit the model that is inside their head that is distorted. And that's why we have systemic and structural racism. That's why we have religions that continue to act in corrupt ways and are not held accountable, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're checking this out on YouTube, you can see I have a little graphic on the screen that shows that a triggering situation or event then goes through our thoughts and internal dialogue, and then our emotions and feelings are then based on that. It isn't the situation itself that causes any emotions or causes any actions. It is our thoughts and our internal dialogue about that situation, which is also, again, based upon our memories, experiences, etc. So that's what drives our actions. And the key, and I say this all the time, the key is to try to comprehend the situation or event as close to reality as possible. It is to comprehend reality as it is, and to not let your thoughts and internal dialogue to distort it, and then decide what you will do about it. That is an optimal response. All right, so that is the quote for the week. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get to unmasking the news. Here's the break. All right, welcome back and welcome to Unmasking the News, where we expose the truth behind the headlines and highlight what matters for our community. And so this week in the news, as I said, there are three stories that we want to talk about. The first one is the guardrails aren't strained, they're being stripped for parts. And that's our democracy update. The next is the collar, when the collar hides the crime, which is our religious news. And then we're going to end with good news, black excellence, no apology. So that's what we have to go through in the news segment this week. So let's get right to it. So first up, the guardrails aren't strained, they're being stripped for parts. What I mean by that is democracy isn't in the process of crumbling, it is crumbled. Executive power immunized institutional guardrails and systematically dismantled, or that was already systematically dismantled through calculated strategic erosion. So American democracy today isn't under stress. It's being cannibalized in broad daylight. The latest few days tell the story with embarrassing clarity. A president auditioning the military for domestic political theater, a White House pumping racist deepfakes on government property during a shutdown that it helped trigger, and the Supreme Court that has already handed the president a velvet rope path around criminal accountability. This just isn't normal drift or a normal slide. It is a demolition of the very foundation of democracy. So let's start at the top. Retired Justice Anthony Kennedy, who retired from the Supreme Court to allow Ketanji Jackson to be appointed. And he was hardly a radical. He wasn't really a progressive. He was more of a moderate that was on the court. But he just warned that, quote, democracy is not guaranteed to survive, end quote. And again, I think that's important. He said democracy is not guaranteed to survive. And he was citing the court's partisanship and the fraying civic norms. And so Kennedy is no resistance icon. He authored Obergefell, and he spent decades as a conservative swing vote on the Democratic side. So if he's sounding klaxons, it means that the institution he once embodied now looks unmoored even to those who were on the inside of it working. Meanwhile, at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the bow is policy. The administration played racist deepfake loops of Democratic leaders from the White House briefing room during a government shutdown touched off by its own manufactured standoff, while ordering federal staff to weaponize official communications to blame the opposition. So what they're doing is trying to say that that is what the Trump administration is doing, is trying to say, and this is the GOP across the board, so there are no standouts and people doing the right thing. What they're trying to do is to blame the Democrats for the shutdown, simply because the Democrats say that we want to make sure that people have health care. So this is all their manufactured bullshit. But this is what corrosion looks like. So it's public resources deployed for partisan disinformation. And like my wife has been saying over and over, it's like they are blatantly lying about what's going on. They are talking about, for example, they keep saying that that the Democrats want undocumented people to get Medicaid and Medicare and other things like that. That isn't true. That undocumented people do not have the ability to get the benefits that the Republicans or the Democrats are fighting for. So, but let's go on though, and you layer on the authoritarian cosplay. So proposals to treat U.S. cities and Trump said this out of his own motherfucking mouth, as military training grounds. Now, that's not about safety. They're a stress test for using troops on civilians under the banner of crime and under the banner of law and order and under the banner of immigration. That's what the fuck he's trying to do. So when elected leaders have to remind a president that the military doesn't exist to overawe domestic opponents, then you're past a warning light. You're already driving on the rim and sparks are flying every fucking where. Democracy is dead at that point. And all of this sits atop the Supreme Court's grant of sweeping criminal immunity for what they called core presidential acts and presumptive immunity for the rest. You don't need a PhD in comparative politics to see the problem. Once you raise the executive above the law, every other guardrail becomes decoration. The Brennan Center calls this term of the president a showdown between the presidency and the democratic values, which democratic values are losing. And legal scholars note that the ruling recorded accountability, that is the Supreme Court's ruling, recorded accountability into a privilege. And that's not a constitutional order. That's an elective monarchy with just better branding. And then let's take this and zoom out on the comparative picture. It's uglier still. So analysts tracking backsliding see the familiar toolkit. Politicized security forces, disinformation from the state itself, attacks on independent institutions, and legal shields for the leader. America once lectured others about guardrails. Now we're cribbing from the global playbook of decay. Trump has read the authoritarian playbooks and he's putting that into play. So now we're copying off motherfucking authoritarians, Putin and the rest of the gang. So here's the blunt truth. Guardrails are not metaphysical. They aren't this like grand ideology that is sacrosanct and sacred. They're habits, incentives, and lines that powerful people fear to cross, which we no longer have. So when presidents are immunized, soldiers are normalized on city streets, and propaganda is piped through the federal podiums, and courts wink at it all, then those lines aren't just crossed, they're completely erased. Now, I'm going to talk about what we need to do with what's going on now. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure if there's anything that we can do at this point. It may be too late. But first of all, we need to re-weaponize law for the public and not the king or the prince. Congress must statutorily cabin presidential immunity after Trump v. United States. They need bright lines, explicit carve-outs for election interference, abuse of force, and self-protection. No deference incantations, no airy standards, draft like you expect bad actors. The Supreme Court has ruled in a way that they think everybody's like Biden, that is not going to cross the line. But everybody fucking knows Trump's going to step over every line he can if he can do so with impunity, which he now has. So Congress needs to go back and put some laws in place. And then we need to firewall the uniform from the podium. So reinforce posse comitatus. That is, we can't have our army on city streets, and tighten funding strings so that deploying troops or even threatening to do so for domestic politics carries immediate legal and budgetary pain. In other words, treating cities as training grounds should be a red line, and we should use that phrase that came out of Trump's fucking mouth as a reason to go back and again create some lawsuits against him for that. And then criminalize state-sponsored deepfakes in official venues. So, well, it should be criminalized everywhere, but certainly within the government. If you use a government facility or channels to disseminate deceptive synthetics, that's a misuse of public resources with an automatic penalty, or it should be. The First Amendment protects citizens, not the state abuse of its megaphone. So Trump can't just go and J.D. Vance and Mike Johnson and all these other idiot motherfuckers just can't go on air in the Oval Office and in other places of power talking nonsense and putting up nonsense deep fakes and just get away with it. We need to start criminalizing that shit. And then we should harden elections like critical infrastructure, because it is. So the ABA's 2025 task force is right. Cyber resilience, transparency audits, and rapid readiness are non-negotiable in a threat environment where the state itself may be the arsonist. Fund it federally, enforce it locally. We need to make sure that elections are free and fair. And then we need to beat back Section 2 erosion in the courts and in the states. So if doctrinal sleight of hand turns vote dilution into near impossible intent hunt, the remedy is preemptive past state level VRAAs and lock in nonpartisan maps where you control the government. So we need to start having not from the Trump government, but we need to have federal rules around what state gerrymandering can look like. And we need to make sure that it's not gerrymandering, in fact, because I think that in and of itself should be illegal, but it certainly shouldn't be geared toward eliminating people of color from the election rolls, which is what's going on now. And then we should also, lastly, name the project and counter the project. So the coordinated agenda to capture the civil service and chill election protection work has been mapped, treated as such with interdiction and relentless litigation. We should be, and even us as individuals, if they reduce the paper ballots or the mail-in ballots in your state, sue them. If you are an elderly person or someone that can't really get to the polls that easy, if they reduce the number of polls in your precinct, file a lawsuit. We have to start being litigious with everything that is related to this because Trump is just going to whittle this shit away until there's nothing left, and then he can truly do whatever the fuck he wants, and you can already see that that's some despicable shit. Now, for me, I'm an atheist and a humanist. I don't pray for institutions to behave. I demand that they be made to behave. The myths of the American exceptionalism won't save us. Only organized power, legal, electoral, economic, will save us. Guardrails hold when those who would leap the median believe that they'll flip the car. So we have to make them believe that their actions are going to lead to their demise. And standing on the sidelines and criticizing is not going to fucking do it. We need to do more. All right, so that is it for that story. So let's go on to the next story. And in this one, when the collar hides the crime. So what are we talking about here? So it is time, and the subtitle for this particular story is Religion's Ongoing Cover for Child Predators. And if you're checking this out on YouTube, you see I have a graphic on the screen which says Unholy Fathers, Book 1, Why Pedophile Priests Prosper While Children Suffer. Because that's essentially what's happening in the churches today. And again, like I said in the intro, it's not just priests, because this isn't just a Catholic issue, but it's priests, pastors, Sunday school teachers, nuns, a whole bunch of them are doing this shit. So let's stop pretending this is a one bad apple situation. It's not. In Montgomery County, Texas, just this week, a worship minister was arrested while, get this, he was arrested while he was ministering at a woman's prison. So he was in a prison, supposedly ministering to women in that prison, where he was picked up. Not in a back alley, but in the act of so-called representing God behind bars. Now, according to authorities and court filings, John Paul Sheepcock, worship minister at First Montgomery Baptist Church, is accused of distributing child sexual abuse material and coercing a teenage girl after allegedly stealing a nude image of her from her iCloud account. Now, the affidavit describes intimidation, including sending a video of a physical assault. He sent her a video of someone getting beat up and told her, I'd hate to see that happen to you. And he did it to pressure the victim for more images. Now, he was taken into custody at the Dr. Lane Murray unit at Gatesville. An initial report said that he was held in Coryell County pending extradition, but subsequent local coverage reports said he later bonded out. Now, the church says that it has removed him immediately and turned over a church computer to investigators. All of these allegations, all of these are, of course, allegations, and he is entitled to due process, but the pattern is looking very familiar, and it's enough to make you sick. So, spare me the hand wringing about wolves among the flocks and all that shit, because you try to say that like this is a random misfortune. But predators go to where trust is high, oversight is low, and image management replaces accountability. So predators go where predators are going to be successful, and they seem to be in religious organizations more than anywhere else. Churches are perfect. They're perfectly built for this. They have built-in authority, proximity to children, a culture that shields, quote, God's anointed from scrutiny, and a reflex to pray problems away rather than to report them. And no, like I said, this isn't just a Catholic problem or a Southern Baptist problem. It is a religion problem. The Catholic Church's own commission, John Jay Studies, tallied 4,392 clergy credibly accused in the U.S. from 1950 to 2002. And get this, that was 10,667 allegations. So almost three times per clergy person that was accused. So there were multiple offenders, allegations against multiple allegations against each defender. And that's only the official accounting, and you know that the total in reality is going to be much, much higher. In 2022, the Southern Baptist Convention finally released a 205-page list with 700 plus names tied to abuse cases after years of gatekeeping and stonewalling survivors. And recent peer-reviewed research estimates that after years of gatekeeping and stonewalling survivors, recent research estimates that about 1 in 250 people report childhood sexual abuse by an adult in a religious organization. That is extremely high, extremely high. And it's an astonishing prevalence for institutions that claim the moral high ground. Men are far more likely to report being victimized in these settings, a fact that punctuates the comfortable myths about who is at risk. But let's get back to Montgomery County. But before we do that, also, this isn't just a U.S. issue either. It is worldwide. It's going on everywhere in every single religion. But back to Montgomery County. Officials say that Sheep Talk wasn't in charge of children programs at the church. That's what the church said. Like that's supposed to soothe us. It shouldn't soothe anybody. Predators in religious settings don't need a job title that says children to gain access to and leverage. All they need is a pulpit, a guitar, a prayer circle, a reputation for piety, and a congregation trained to doubt its own eyes before it doubts the so-called shepherd. The first Montgomery statement strikes the predictable notes. Grievous sin, no cover-up, will cooperate. Fine. Cooperation is the floor of what you can do, not the ceiling. It's the table stakes. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The prolific nature of child abuse under the cloak of religion is not an accident. It isn't. It is a feature of a system that wraps ordinary men in spiritual armor and then acts shock when some of them use it as a weapon, and far too many of them do. A theology that elevates leaders as called by God, and a polity that fears scandal more than harm, and a culture that confuses forgiveness with impunity, that's the petri dish for growing predators. And people of faith will say, well, not all churches. That's correct, but the structure that enables abuse is common. Deference, opacity, and theological force field around leadership. Until that structure is dismantled, the headlines will keep coming, and they come every single day, and they'll keep coming whether the setting is a cathedral, a suburban megachurch, or a worship leader serving in a prison. Now, religion loves to market itself as the conscience of the nation. Earn it then. Protect the vulnerable first. Stop laundering predators' reputations and spare the rest of us the sermons until your house is clean. All right, let's go on to the next story here. And in this particular case, we are going to end with a good news story. And the good news story is Black excellence, no apologies. And so I always like to end this segment with some good news, and I like to bring the receipts for that good news. So Deidre Windsor, a Black woman, Army veteran, and founder and CEO of Windsor Group LLC, just notched a 5th consecutive placement on the Inc. 5000 list. Fewer than 1% of companies have ever pulled that off. And that's not just like vibes, that's operational discipline on her part. So Windsor's firm is based in Bethesda, Maryland, and built for government-grade execution. So of programs and project management, professional technical staffing, IT support, training, and management consulting. And it's backed by an SB 8A loan and GSA MAS credentials. It's a woman, minority, and service-disabled veteran-owned business competing and winning in the federal arena. Now let's get to her scoreboard. From $103,000 in revenue in 2017 to $37 million in 2003, $25 million in 2004, and $90 million in total revenue on $95 million in prime contracts across 15 federal agencies, while employing 260 plus professionals and engaging 100 plus consultants and 40 subcontractors. Now that is an ecosystem building, not just a company win. And this year's Inc. listing is confirmation, and Windsor Group ranks 1,487 on the 2025 list. 5 straight years isn't luck, that is a process that she's executing. And here's why it matters for our community. So Windsor's Scale Play, USDA's Discrimination Financial Assistance Program, rollout in 21 offices in 27 states, stood up in 45 days, show that when we design for capacity contracts, compliance, and cash flow, we move markets and communities. And add $600,000 in philanthropy, and you see the model. Profit fuels people, people fuels progress. So no savior theology, no bootstrap fables, just strategy, certifications, execution, and reinvestment. So if you want a blueprint for durable Black economic power, study what Deidre Windsor is doing and replicate it ruthlessly. All right, well, this has been Unmasking the News. And so we see that Trump is in the final stages of dismantling the U.S. democracy. Preachers are still predators, but there is some hope in Black businesses, and we can at least be happy about that. So if we want to be a free people, it is up to us to define our government and economic systems, one that plays to our strengths and put us as a priority. That is why I'm telling you what's in the news now, but what needs to be in the news is us doing for ourselves, forming our own nation within a nation, our own structure, government structure within the government, and our own economic system within an economic system. All right, that is it for Unmasking the News. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to finish up with the last segment for today, which is Bible Study with an Atheist. All right, welcome back, and welcome to Bible Study with an Atheist, where, as I said, our topic for today is what goes to heaven. And so one thing I'd like to, before we get started, that I'd like to mention, I did have a news story that I pulled down from Stacey Abrams' site, her podcast on the destruction of democracy, but unfortunately I forgot to play it. But I will have in the audio version I'll have the show notes listed there. So if you want to go and view that, I was only going to play like 3 or 4 minutes of it, but it's an hour-long segment. But it is a really good one, and Stacey Abrams is someone that I think can really point us in the direction that we need to go politically. But anyway, let's get to this Bible study. So welcome back to Bible Study with an Atheist, where we strip the sacred gloss off Scripture and see what's actually under the hood. And this week we are doing a systematic theology deep dive into one of Christianity's favorite promises, heaven. But specifically what we want to talk about today is what will be in heaven. And you might ask, what do I mean by that? Because we talked about who would go to heaven. Well, what I mean, is it going to be souls, spirits? Is it going to be resurrected bodies? Will there be sex? Will emotions exist? How old will we be? And perhaps most importantly, will there even be free choice? Will we have the option of doing what we want to do if we make it to heaven? So the problem is that Christians preach heaven like it's from a postcard. Streets of gold, pearly gates, endless bliss. But when you actually comb through the Bible, it's fragmented, contradictory, and frankly, nonsensical. So let's walk through the theology and then we will dismantle it bit by bit. So first off, let's just get right to it. What's it going to be? Is it going to be souls, spirits, or bodies? So here's the theological claim. So Christians insist that believers will have glorified bodies in heaven. And they point to Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 52 and 53. Quote, "The dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality," end quote. But Jesus himself, post-resurrection, supposedly gives us a model. In Luke 24, chapter 39, he declares, quote, "A spirit hath not flesh and bones as ye see me have," end quote. But yet he vanishes and reappears at will. So the theological conclusion from that is then in heaven, we will have physical but not physical bodies. They'll be physical in flesh and bone in some ways, and Jesus still had holes in his side and in his hands. So I don't know how that's glorified, but somehow out of all of that nonsense, the Christians come up with we will have a glorified body in heaven. But here's the problem. This is a muddle of Greek philosophy and Jewish resurrection myths. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 7 contradicts Paul, saying, quote, "The dust returneth to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto the God who gave it." Now that implies the body decays while only the spirit goes to God. So which is it? Are we ghostly essences or incorruptible flesh? And is our flesh, unlike Jesus, going to grow back? Jesus still, like I said, he still had the wounds. So if you were blown to bits, what's going to happen? If you were cremated, what happens there? But of course, Christians dodge all of this by saying it's both spiritual bodies. So it's both of them. It's spiritual bodies, but spiritual body is an oxymoron like square circle. It's a theological word salad meant to cover up for the fact that the texts don't agree with each other in the Bible. All right, so I think a good continuation of that is whether or not we're going to have bodies is how old we will be in heaven. So the theological claim. So Christians insist that heaven, again, involves glorified bodies. So the next obvious question then is, what age are those bodies? Now, the Bible never answers that. There's nowhere in the Bible where it says that we're all going to be 30 years old or whatever the fuck. But tradition tries to fill the silence. Some argue that everyone will be in their early 30s since Jesus was around 33 at his death and resurrection. But others claim that infants will grow into adulthood in heaven. So they claim that the infants will be resurrected as babies, but then they will grow up to become adults. And then I assume at some point stop growing, which again doesn't make any sense. But the Christians also say that the elderly will restore to youthful vigor, whatever that means. So the common refrain is that believers will receive perfected bodies at some ideal stage of life, free from frailty, deformity, handicaps, or any kind of decline. And of course, I mean, what about even color as an example? Or, I mean, I like being black. Are we no longer going to have color? What color are we going to be? And so all of this is just nonsensical. And if Christians ever took the time to go through the Bible and see what it actually says and what it doesn't say, then this whole idea of heaven would become more and more nonsensical. So here's the problem with this, how old we will be in heaven and the theological claim. None of this speculation comes from the Bible. The Bible is entirely silent on the question of age. And the perfect age argument only deepens the contradictions. A child who dies never becomes the unique adult they might have been. An elder who lived decades of joy and hardship loses the visible record of their story. To erase age is to erase individuality. The claim of perfected bodies is less revelation than wishful thinking, a projection designed to patch the text's silence. Heaven isn't a consistent doctrine. It is a shifting set of promises that collapses the moment that you demand any detail. And then, so we talked about how old we will be. We talked about whether we'll have bodies or be spirits. What about sex? Now, again, sex on this earth is something that I particularly care for. And if you were trying to sell me on heaven, then certainly there would be some sex going on there. But in this particular case, the theological claim, I think Jesus kind of nailed this one. Jesus addresses it head on in Matthew chapter 22, verse 30, when he said, quote, "For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven," end quote. Now, traditional theology interprets this as no marriage, no sex. But instead, the joy of heaven is a union with God, not a union with a spouse. Now, of course, there are contradictions there as well, because in the Old Testament, the Bible says that the sons of men, which is interpreted as angels, had sex with the daughters of, or sons of God rather, had sex with the daughters of men. So it was saying that implied and is interpreted as if that the angels came down and in fact did have sex. So if Jesus is saying that we are as the angels in heaven, maybe sex is a possibility. And of course, according to the Old Testament, that produced giants, of which Goliath was one. But anyway, here's the problem with all of this sex or no sex shit. This makes heaven a place of eternal celibacy if there's no sex. Christians on earth obsessed over sex, and even the Christians are condemning it, regulating it, shaming it. But the supposed ultimate reward erases sexuality altogether. The command of Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, to be fruitful and multiply, vanishes in heaven. And apparently reproduction was a divine command only for the earth, but not in eternity. And here's the kicker. Many believers think sex is the ultimate temptation. Yet, if God can design a sinless heaven without it, why did he saddle humanity with a desire in the first place? Heaven without sex isn't paradise. It's a monastery in the sky, and I don't fucking want to go. All right, let's go on because still there's some more that we need to figure out. What about emotions in heaven? And if you're checking this out on YouTube, I have a graphic that I want to, or not a graphic, but just a quote that I copied and put in. And it says, some say this place can't be heaven. So I ask of them, do you think in spirit form we can experience a first kiss or the sun in our face or the birth of our children? We come here to experience these human experiences and emotions. In spirit, earth is heaven, and on earth, spirit form is heaven. Such a paradox we live in, or we find ourselves in. So in other words, that if you were devoid of any emotion, you would see earth as heaven. You would see it as paradise, because people are able to, yes, we have the bad, but it is only through the bad that we can enjoy the good. But let's go ahead and talk about this topic of emotions in heaven. So here's the theological claim. Revelation chapter 21 verse 4 is the go-to for most Christians. And it says, quote, "And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain." And also in Psalm 16 verse 11, it says, quote, "In thy presence of fullness of joy," end quote. So the promise is an eternity of perfect joy, no sorrow, and no grief. That's what's supposed to be in heaven. Sounds good, right? Well, here's the problem with that. Emotions only make sense as contrast. Joy is meaningful precisely because sorrow exists. If sorrow didn't exist, then there could be no joy. You wouldn't know the difference between it. It's just the same. You take away grief, struggle, and loss, and joy becomes just bland sameness every single day. What Christians described is not eternal joy. It's an emotional lobotomy where you have no emotions whatsoever. Imagine a world where you're only capable of smiling. That's all you can do all day long is a fucking smile. That isn't paradise. It's a psychological mutilation. Stripped of the full range of emotions, you are no longer human. You are a programmed worship bot, which is what Revelation says you're going to be in heaven anyway. Because if you read Revelation, it says that there's going to be an eyeball monster, a thing with eyes all around it outside and eyes all on the inside. And it's going to be next to the throne of God. And all of the so-called saints are standing there saying, "Holy, holy, holy," all day long. So that is what you get when you go to heaven. You get no emotion. You get no happiness. You get no joy because there's no pain, no sorrow, no sadness. You just sit there and repeat, "Holy, holy, holy," until, well, never, because there is no end. So that's it forever. If you want to go there, then fine. So, but again, count me out. And so the last thing I want to talk about before we close down this nonsense is, will there even be free will in heaven? So here's the theological claim. So theologians insist that heaven is free of sin and rebellion. Revelations chapter 21 verse 27 proclaims, "There shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie," end quote. So Christian apologists say free will still remains, but because our wills are, quote, perfected, they say we will never choose sin again. But here's the problem with that. That's not free will. That's programming. If your will is perfected, which again, like we said earlier without emotions, you can perfect a criminal with a lobotomy. They used to do that. They had no trouble with them after that. They had no useful purpose in the world after that either, but they weren't committing any crimes. They were just sitting drooling on themselves all day. So if your will is perfected such that you can never choose anything wrong, then you no longer have a genuine choice. You're just sitting there lobotomized. And and the other thing is, if free will really exists in heaven, then why couldn't just another Lucifer incident happen? Then after all, by Christian tradition, Satan fell while he was in heaven. He decided that it wasn't what he wanted to see. So he didn't want to live that way. So why, if there is free will in heaven, how can there say that there is, shall in no wise any enter into it anything that defileth, when a third of heaven, Satan and a third of the angels said, fuck that, we don't want it? Why couldn't those who make it to heaven also decide after billions of years that this boring ass shit needs to go? So the fact of the matter is, you can't have it both ways. Either heaven is sinless because choice is removed, or heaven risks rebellion again. Either way, the theology collapses. And here's the ultimate irony. Christianity spends all of its time on earth telling us that free will is God's gift and the reason that evil exists. So they say evil exists because of free will. Yet in heaven, evil is eliminated by taking that free will away. So which is it? A gift worth the Holocaust? Because that's why they say the Holocaust happened. It wasn't God letting evil happen. It was free will. So giving humans free will was worth the Holocaust, or is it a liability that God deletes when it no longer suits him, i.e. once you get to heaven? So here's the bottom line for all of this that we've gone through. The Bible is incoherent about heaven. Are we souls, spirits, or bodies? It depends on which verse you read. Is there sex? Jesus says no, so your ultimate reward is chastity forever. Emotions, only positive ones, meaning you're stripped of real humanity. Age, who fucking knows? And free will, eliminated, or else heaven would collapse under its own contradictions. So the picture of heaven is not a paradise. It is cosmic North Korea, no dissent, no individuality, constant praise for a dictator who demands your worship. In stripping away your body, sexuality, emotions, and free will, heaven removes everything that makes us human and everything that makes you you. As an atheist, I'll say it plainly. Heaven as described by the Bible is not worth wanting. It's not a promise. It is a threat. And for me, I take the threat. I'm going to do everything in my power not to fucking go there. All right, that is it for Bible Study with an Atheist. And we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have our segment of reflections and call to action and just kind of reminisce over this episode and what we learned. All right, welcome back, and welcome to the reflection and call to action segment. And let's go ahead and get into it. So what did we learn this week? Well, first of all, this week's lyric wasn't poetry. It was a diagnosis. Belief bends perception. And when a nation prefers a flattering lie to an uncomfortable truth, the lie becomes a lens through which everything is viewed. We saw that lens everywhere. In Democracy Watch, guardrails aren't merely strained, they're being stripped for parts. Presidential impunity normalized, propaganda pumped from official podiums, and a causal flirtation with using military as domestic theater. Those aren't glitches, they are the operating system of authoritarianism. In religious corruption, the familiar script played out again, a pious title used as a camouflage, institutional reflexes that protect reputation over children, and a theology that launders accountability into forgiveness. The pattern isn't denominational, it's structural. Deference, opacity, and magical thinking leads to that every time. And in the Bible Study with an Atheist, the sales pitch for heaven collapses under its own contradictions. souls versus bodies, joy without the possibility of sorrow, free will that you can never choose. So faith remains a special pleading and exemption from all evidence in the one domain that most demands it. But yet, we did have some good news and a counter script. So it was a balance. It kind of had the balance sheet on the other side with Deidre Windsor's 5-year run on the Inc. 5000. And that's what disciplined principled power looks like. Certifications, receipts, payrolls, philanthropy, strategy that survives contact with reality. And that's the model. Organize like engineers, not revivalists, and build systems that don't need belief to work. So after this episode, what should we do? Well, first of all, we just need to harden the democracy. So adopt a precinct for yourself, fund election protection, and press for statutory limits on presidential immunity and misuse of federal resources. Power respects paperwork and the consequences, so power respects power. And then we need to kill the disinformation supply chain. Verify before you amplify, and treat synthetic media and too perfect outrage as hazardous waste. Train family and personal circles on basic media forensics. We should all know how to dissect an article or a tweet or a post in order to get to the truth of it. And demand external accountability from religious organizations. Independent reporting lines, third-party audits, to adults at all time rules, glass doors, no money without compliance, no pulpit without transparency. If you want to preach that shit, then go ahead, but let's make sure that it's safe for our kids. Next, move money with intent. What does that mean? It means commit a fixed slice of a monthly budget to spend on Black-owned firms. Leave reviews, mentor founders, and join co-op, capital pools, and credit unions. Receipts are our rhetoric. Having us participate in our Black economy is how we start to move money with intent. And next, we need to practice method over myth. So make the scientific method your community ethic. We are not going by an epistemology of faith. Faith is a poor way of knowing anything. Use the scientific method. Design a hypothesis, test it and for fallibility, and then only what remains is the truth. And so we need evidence, and policies need pilots. Failures produce data, so no special pleading for anyone's dogma, no matter what it is, even if it's one that is friendly to us. And next, we need to build disciplined coalitions. And coalitions are a specific thing, and we need to know that. Coalitions are usually temporary. So clear roles, open books, shared symbols, tight feedback loops, organizing that can scale beats charisma that can't. So we don't just need some charismatic support system. What we need are coalitions of people who have the same objective in mind. All right, so that's reflections and call to action. So we don't negotiate with delusion, we out-organize it. We see clearly, we act collectively, make fraud expensive, and truth useful, and the future will stop happening to us and start happening for us. All right, that is it for this week's segment of the reflections and call to action, and also for our overall episode. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to close things out for this week. All right, welcome back. And as I said, it is time for us to close out for this week. So let's get to it. So first of all, I would like to tell you, or ask you, plead with you actually, to subscribe to the show, whether you're watching the YouTube version or listening to the audio version. Subscribe on whatever platform you're on. Also, rate the show and share feedback as well. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just click the like button. You can subscribe to the channel there, and you can also click that bell so you'll get notifications on whenever we drop a new episode. I'd also say that if you have any feedback on this particular episode, then you can do that as well right in YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version, then send any feedback to feedback@rationalblackthought.com. Again, if you're listening to the audio version, but you prefer to get your podcast in another platform other than where we are, and we are on a lot of them with Google, Stitcher, Amazon, iTunes, etc. But if you want it on a different platform, just send that platform to me at feedback@rationalblackthought.com. I'd also like to remind you to check out my website at rationalblackthought.com. And now I'll remind you that the music, the intro music you heard was Transcend by KIRK. The ending music you just heard was Ending by Micaiah Beats. And I'd like to leave you with these words from Frederick Douglass. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. And I am going to sign off now and get started right on bringing you back some good information on what's going on in the world, and some information in this next week is going to be our strategies for Black Power, and I'll be bringing you in more information for that. So look forward to being with you again next week. Enjoy the rest of your week.